Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on today's episode, we are talking about video games. I'm not going to lie, I am living with a roommate who enjoys playing video games. He may actually be playing them right now as I record, and I had to ask him to go on mute because obviously recording a podcast and yelling about how you have to kill the bad guys don't really mix well together. But we do strike a bit of a compromise when it does come to certain video games, because I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy the good Luigi's Haunted Mansion 3. I enjoy Overcooked. I enjoy Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley. Like, there's tons of video games I like too, for sure, but it definitely is another world, and it's another world filled with marketing and advertising strategies that, although we may not be working in the video game world, or perhaps some of you are, but even if you're not, there's definitely still something to learn from that industry and something to gain with all this knowledge and information that is available out there. So today we'll be talking about some stats and facts and some strategies about the video game marketing world. So stay tuned for all of that on today's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and let's get right into today's episode. I've decided to skip our news segment for today's episode because I want to show you that I am listening to your review. Some people say they don't like the news. Some people say they love it. So I thought we would try out an episode where we don't talk about what is happening with other companies and we only focus on your company and your marketing. But this does come with a bit of a challenge for you. I would like you to tell me something you would like me to change about the podcast. And there's only one way for us to communicate, is for you to write it in the review down below, or you can reach out through social media. I am perfectly good with either. As long as you are a subscriber, I will listen. So please comment, rate, review, subscribe, do all of the things, because we really do want to hear from you. We want to hear your opinions on the podcast, and we want to connect. So tune in and try to connect with us, because we would love, love, love to hear from you. So let's jump right into today's episode with some stats and facts about the video game marketing world. Our first stat and or fact is that there are 2.5 billion gamers in the world. So going forward, when you hear me use the term gamers or video gamers, that obviously is just people who play video games on a regular basis. They consider this not a part of their identity, but definitely one of their hobbies. I know a lot of people who take video game as very seriously as a hobby, but also people who just play it casually who would not consider themselves to be gamers. The 2.5 billion people are definitely the people who are taking it seriously and who are treating it as such. So that is all well and good. So 2.5 billion people is definitely a lot. That is definitely a big number, and let's not pretend that it isn't. So if anything, that just shows you how big this market is and how there is a lot of room for growth and a lot of potential for some amazing marketing strategies. Number 2, 48% of gaming studios work on VR and AR games. So this is just a great example as well to show you how the market is changing, because if I'd been doing this podcast 10 years ago, Oh, no, it may have still been VR. How about we do 30 years ago? We definitely would not have been talking about VR games, and it definitely wouldn't be 48% of gaming studios are working on VR games. So very interesting to see how the market is changing and how they are trying to develop new products for those 2.5 billion gamers. Fact number 3. Every day, 25 new games are released on Steam. So for those of you that don't know, Steam is a streaming platform where people can go and buy video games. They can also watch other people play, I believe, as well. It is a streaming platform, I believe. But mostly you can buy games on there. That's where normally a lot of the big ones will be released. Number 4, the gaming video content market was worth $5.2 billion in 2018. We're going to talk about how those numbers have changed, but just think of the fact that 3 years ago it was worth $5.2 billion. Number 5, the revenue of the digital game industry in the U.S. was worth $10 billion in 2019. So guys, like $5 billion extra dollars went into this industry in just the U.S. in 1 year. This is clearly a place of growth and development and a lot of opportunities for us here to learn. Number 6, 75% of Americans have at least one video gamer in their household. Again, that is shorthand for someone who is playing games as more of a hobby. They spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy towards the video games industry, and they aren't just playing casually. Maybe they've occasionally picked up a DS game or an Xbox game. Nope, these are people who are committed to the industry. They are constantly buying products. They are constantly playing new games. Number 7, the U.S. video game market is expected to reach a revenue of $90 billion by 2020. So guys, I just gave you what it currently is for 2019 in the U.S. is $10 billion. And they're expecting it to reach $90 billion in 1 year. That is insane. That is incredible that we are living in a time and in a place where something like that can happen, and an industry and a market is growing so rapidly. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for us to use marketing and to be a part of that marketing industry. Number 8, we're going to get into some more demographic stuff here with some of the other ones. So this is definitely, if you work in the video game industry, you might find these interesting. If you don't work, you might find them interesting as well. I know I definitely did. So number 8, 46% of gamers are female and 54% of gamers are male. So that was number 8 and 9, sorry. Number 10, the average age of a male gamer is 32. Number 11, 78% of gamers claim that video games are mentally stimulating while they're also relieving stress for them. This was an interesting fact because I definitely feel like there has to be a lot of justification that gets put in when you play a lot of video games. And I get that from people I know who play them. They always feel like they need to justify why they're playing it. And I've definitely heard a lot of people mention that it is a stress reliever and that it is mentally stimulating more than just watching TV. So it's really interesting, and I think later when we talk about the marketing strategies, we'll definitely see those positivities and that idea of it being a good thing for you come out. Number 12, the South Asia gaming market is estimated to generate up to $4.6 billion in 2019. Number 13, in 2019, around 2.4 billion people will play mobile games. So this is another component of it that maybe you didn't realize. I know I didn't until I was writing all of these out, and then I was like, right, this does count. Just because it's a video game, and just because one of these facts is talking about video games, doesn't mean you have to be like on your computer in one of those throne chairs that has like a joystick installed, wearing a headset, yelling to kill the bad guys. No, think of every time you've played Candy Crush. Think of when you played Angry Birds. Like, those are video games, and so they do interact with all of these stats and facts. And so I guarantee that perhaps you didn't think you were a gamer, but every time you've been bored in a hospital waiting room or a dentist office or just like even in an elevator, you have played a video game and you yourself have taken on the role of being a gamer. Number 14, 52% of gamers will play on personal computers. So this obviously was actually a shocking fact to find only 52% of gamers play on personal computers, because then that tells me, okay, so then are the other 40-something% playing on, like, school computers? Like, it's very interesting for sure. Number 15, 42% of Americans play video games every week. The industry is huge in the United States, and it is not something we can easily just ignore. This is definitely an industry that is worth exploring, and it is an industry that is worth taking a look into, because if it's talking to so many people on a weekly basis, then obviously there is something out there for us as marketers to take advantage of, as weird as that seems. But I think it's important to take a look at industries like this that, although we may not think we touch directly, they could affect us, or we could be taking advantage of it, or we could be utilizing it more. So it's very important, I think, to explore these types of industries, but I would like to hear what types of industries you would like me to explore. So please do not be shy. Write it in the review, comment it on our social media, retweet the episode with your suggestion, whatever you'd like to do, because we would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the podcast and on the podcast topics. I want to talk about what you want to listen to, so definitely let me know your thoughts, and stay tuned, because when we come back, we have our first couple of strategies here for you to examine. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you again. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Thank you so much if you are a returning listener to this podcast, if you've been listening since the beginning when I had a horrible mic and I had no idea what I was talking about. Let me just take a minute to genuinely thank you. This podcast means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the GSMC network as well. And we take it seriously because we understand that you have a lot of options to choose from when picking your podcast, when picking your source of entertainment. And so we feel very lucky that you are listening to our episodes, you are interacting with us on social media, and you are genuinely connecting with the content. We want to connect with you as well. So if you have a suggestion, some feedback, you want to start a conversation, you have a question, please do not be afraid to write it in the review down below. Don't be afraid to DM us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, because we would absolutely love to hear from you. We want this podcast to be something that is useful and something educational and actually provides value to people. So we are working very hard to create top of the line content for you, and I hope you feel that you are getting your money's worth, even though you're not paying, but your time's worth, that you're not just listening to me ramble on for hours and hours on end and you're not learning anything. That's not what we want, and that's not what you want as a listener. So we do think it's important that you tell us what you want so that we can deliver it. So please don't ever be shy. Reach out if you want, reach out if you don't, but we would really just love to hear your opinion, because your opinion matters to us. We want this to be a really great community, so help us build that community together. But for now, I'll put away my thank yous and get right back into today's episode, where we are talking about video game marketing. So the video game industry, like we learned before the break, is huge right now. It is expected to basically double in the next year. People are buying video games. They are playing them on a weekly basis. They are using them on their phones, on their tablets. They own video game consoles. They're buying merch. They're going to festivals. They're going to conferences. This industry is no longer just your son in the garage playing Mario Kart, right? It's not something small, and it is not something we can simply ignore, because it's bigger than that. And because it is bigger than that, that means it comes with a lot of opportunities for marketing and advertising strategies, which is why I know that you're all here. That's what you're wanting to listen to. You want to get ideas and you want to get fresh perspective on your marketing. And so if you make coffee, if you make soap, if you make towels, if you make decorative trash cans, I don't care what you make, you can find value from these strategies we'll talk about next. I have 8 different strategies for you. We'll do a part 1 and a part 2 on this podcast episode of just different strategies that I genuinely think would help you get more attention, maybe perhaps get new customers, keep your old customers, build a following, and build a community. So get your pen and paper out, because we are going to be diving right into all of those right now. All right, so number 1 is blogging. Guys, we talk about blogging all the time. We also talk about vlogging all the time, but do not confuse the two, because blogging is definitely blogging with a V for Victoria. It's definitely a lot more, this is my life, this is behind the scenes, this is how the cheese gets made, this is the milk we use for the cheese, this is how we grind the beans for the coffee, this is how I sew the towels. Whereas blogging is a lot more informational, and this is how you can use the beans in making your own lattes in the morning. This is how you can use the soap if you're looking to create a mood for your bubble bath. I don't know. I don't sell soap. If anyone actually sells soap out there, please let me know. I feel like I use that as an example all the time, and maybe it is actually not useful at all. No one ever knows what I'm talking about when I talk about soap. So please throw me a bone. Tell me if you make soap. But basically, a blog is a great way to, 1, increase your traffic to your site using SEO. You can attract people to your blog by talking about things that people actually want to read about. Meanwhile, you're also slipping in some news about your product. You're introducing them to your product. And it basically works as one very long, valuable commercial. B, you can attract new customers because people may just be looking for a recipe on how to make a latte and they end up finding your beans and they end up finding your company when really all they wanted was a blog about a recipe. Now, boom, they are a part of your community. Number 3, it can attract press. So if you want to be featured on other people's blogs, if you want to be featured in your local newspaper or your local TV network, having a blog and just a bank of content for them to go through and research and look at is a huge win for a lot of reporters, because then they have all of their information right there for them. It's basically like them walking into a candy store and saying, oh, look at all the different flavors of candy they have, because you already have all the information just laying out there for them to take. Number 4, it will show and tell people about your product. So again, in a vlog, you can maybe show it and you can talk about it, but blogging gives you an opportunity to talk about it in a different way, using a different point of view, talking about DIY projects with your product, talking about the history of your product, talking about the value of it during a time like COVID-19. There's just a lot of different ways for you to show and tell your product. Number 5, you can turn your website into a place where people want to spend time because they'll get to read interesting articles and actually gain some value about your product and the industry surrounding your product. And finally, number 6, it gives an opportunity for you to have guest articles from people who have used your products, and it makes it look like it's real content, even though it's basically just a fancy testimonial. You get to create some valuable content for people, and you don't even have to write it. You just have to ask someone else to write it for you. Just make sure you read it before you post it in case they accidentally wrote something really mean, really negative. We wouldn't want that. We don't want that for your product, so just make sure you give it a look over before. The second strategy you can use is to appear on other people's content. So like I said, you're having guest articles come in from people who have used your product. What about those people? Do they have blogs? Do they have YouTube channels? Do they have podcasts? Are they in the media industry? Are they in the cooking industry? Do they have a platform that perhaps you could go and post on as well? Say, hey, I'm your local neighborhood trash can enthusiast, and I want to talk about my trash cans on your weekly podcast. They'll let you. They're looking for content just as much as you are. So it's a great opportunity to network. You both get content out of it. You both get exposure out of it. And it'll hopefully get you some new customers and open your doors a little bit more just for how many people actually know about your product. And it'll let people know how to reach you and how to get in contact with you if they've never heard about you before. Number 3, be a fan of your own product. This is something that the video game industry does very, very well, is they constantly gas up their own product. This is the funnest game they have ever played. This is the best experience they have ever had. These are the strongest characters they have ever seen. Meanwhile, they're the ones who wrote the characters. They're the ones who created the experience. Of course, they think it's good, but that doesn't mean that they have to go to conferences and wear their own merch and talk it up so much and tell you that they genuinely had a fun time playing the game, because maybe they don't, but to the outside world, they need to seem like they are a fan of their own game, because if they don't want to play it, why would you? So if you don't use your own product, why would I, the customer? So make sure you are a fan of your own product to an unreal level. You need to constantly be talking about it when people hit you up or mention it or ask you if you genuinely like it. Have real, valuable thoughts about it and make it so that you're not just reading off of a script every time. Like, you have examples of when you're really low on energy and you really just needed coffee and your beans perked you up, or when you were really stressed out one day and your soap helped you take a relaxing bath. Like, there are just so many different ways for you to talk about your product that I don't want you sounding like you're using a script when you're not. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we have the rest of our video game strategies for you to try out. So stay tuned for that, because you're listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and on tonight's episode of the podcast, we are actually talking about video games. I love video games so much. They keep people entertained, and they help relieve stress, and I know right now a lot of you are probably looking for a way to relieve stress. We are all locked indoors during this lockdown, and although we are so close to the end, guys. I'm in Washington. We're doing our 4-phase reopening of the economy. People are flattening the curve left, right, and center. Things do seem to be opening up and getting better. We are still sort of in it, though. Bars aren't open. Restaurants, movie theaters, none of that is open right now. And even if it is, there are so many rules and regulations, as there should be, around going out. So it makes it very hard to escape right now, and a video game is such a great way to plug in, tune out, and just enjoy your night a little bit without having to think about, oh, I'm stuck in the middle of the coronavirus, and I have to work from home tomorrow, and then sleep where I eat and where I work, and the only person I get to talk to in person is my significant other, or my roommate, or, like, there's always so many countless things for you to keep track of during all of this madness, that a video game is a great way to just hit play and let it all fade away. Another great way to do that by just simply hitting play is by listening to podcasts. Obviously, you know that. You are listening to this podcast right now. But let me tell you about a secret world that's not so secret called the GSMC Podcast Network, where they don't only have amazing podcasts like the one you are listening to right now, they have so many other amazing, terrific, incredible, spectacular podcasts that will totally make you forget about everything that we're in the middle of right now. Sports, if you're interested in sports and right now there are no sports going on at all and you're feeling like you missed that world, go listen to the sports podcast. We're still talking about it over there. We're recording new episodes. We got content for you, baby, content. So I ask, if you haven't checked out the rest of the GSMC podcast network, if this is the first podcast you've heard from us, first of all, thank you. Welcome to our community. But I do request that you go check out what other podcasts we have, because we have so many. We are constantly creating amazing content that I know you're going to love because you're here, you're listening to this one. So clearly you're interested in learning and engaging with the community, because that's what we do here. So I highly recommend the book podcast. It's the one I've been listening to the most lately, but also the tech one is amazing. Beauty is really good. Sports is really great. We have so many. Like, think of a topic, chances are we have a podcast about it. And I know because I get to talk about them and work with them every single day. The hosts of all of these shows love their jobs. They love creating content for you. So go check them out. Give them a chance. And let me know which ones maybe I should be listening to that I haven't heard yet. So again, write it in the review down below or reach out through social media. But let's get back into tonight's episode where we are talking about video game marketing strategies. So we have 8 for you, but before the break, we talked about 3 of them. Number 1 is blogging. Number 2 was to appear in other people's content. And number 3 is to ensure that you are a fan of your own product, which is a perfect segue into strategy number 4. Although you should be a fan of your product, and I truly, truly believe that is incredibly important, that you actually like what you're selling, you also need to establish yourself as an expert, not only on your product, but certainly on your product, but also on your industry. In the video game world, when people ask for reviews or the reviews they trust, it usually comes from other people who create games and from gamers who are playing the games and enjoy other ones or are hooked into a community. It is such a hearsay world that you trust your reviews, you trust your community. So you need to establish yourself as an expert in that community. And you might be saying, okay, but I'm not in the video game world. Guys, this is true for every industry. You need to exert yourself in as an expert so that when people are running around with their heads cut off, wondering what kind of beans give them the most energy, or what kind of beans are more mellow, or what beans have chocolatey undertones, or which ones have nutty undertones, you can turn and be like, hey, I'm actually the coffee bean expert. Here's some advice. And also we sell the type of beans you're looking for. Go ahead and buy them. Rather than the people who are just pushing their product, you can stand there, be an expert about the product, and give them real recommendations and valuable knowledge. Strategy number 5, you can market through reviews and websites. So like I just said, if you establish yourself as an expert, it then gives you the ability to go onto review pages and say, hey, I actually learned this new thing about beans the other day. I learned that the beans that are grown in this side of the world are better than the beans grown on this side of the world. And if you want to check out more, come over to my website. And you can basically poach people from the review section of other people's work. And you're not doing anything slander. You're not lying. You are just saying, hey, I know this now. Do you want to know more? Come check this out. But you're still engaging with them on a level that is more personable and a little bit more engaging. And make sure it still always has to do with whatever the review is. Don't go on to like a tea review place and talk about your coffee beans unless they're talking about what tea gives them the most energy. And you can write on there, There's no tea that gives you as much energy as coffee. Fools, don't call them fools. That was a joke. But I can sell you this type of bean that will give you tons of energy, but still kind of tastes like tea, or you can mix it to make it taste like tea. But if you establish yourself as an expert, you are then able to market through those websites. So do 4 before you do 5. Number 6, this is a huge thing in every industry right now, but it definitely is very popular in the video game industry, is influencer marketing. We definitely know of PewDiePie, and I think his name's like Ninja or something like that, and they are influencers who play video games nonstop. They stream them, they talk about them on social media, but it helps those games grow in audiences and grow a community because they're latching onto this influencers community and their relationship with their viewers. So if you haven't already, I do so many podcasts about influencer marketing. Go check those out, give them a listen, and decide if it's right for you. Number 7, marketing stunts or big promotions. This is something that is huge in the video game industry, but it is basically, it's not going to just be like a Facebook ad carousel or an Instagram ad that's also a video. They're going big with marketing stunts. They're doing huge events and promotions to promote one product, and they're putting in money, time, and effort. And the thing I want you to take away from this is you don't need to suddenly be a sponsor at the X Games, but put in care, put in attention into the marketing campaigns you think your customers are actually going to enjoy and actually are going to engage with. Finally, strategy number 8, sponsor or get involved with other events or products that work with your product. So like I said, you don't need to sponsor the X Games, but if you make coffee and there's a local pottery person, someone who makes pots and she makes mugs, maybe consider networking with her and creating some sort of Christmas holiday gift where you get 2 mugs with a bag of coffee or vice versa. Basically, sponsor or get involved with other events and products or people that mesh well with yours, that connect well with your product. Okay, everyone, that is it for tonight's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.